Early each spring, Jews around the world begin their preparations for Passover. The holiday that commemorates a defining moment in Jewish history, the exodus of the Israelites from Egypt into the Promised Land.
Passover, or Pesach, is traditionally called the Festival of Freedom. And while it's built on the base of the particular freedom that what happened to the Jews who were released from Egypt, the broader meaning, which is part of every Jew's life today, is applicability to people all over the world and to the universal situation of people in bondage.
All through history, there have been stories like this with many, many people all around the world. In the Jewish religion, it's put in such a beautiful way of prayers and singing and reciting and remembering.
The freedom that is commemorated on Passover is a freedom of the Jewish people from the oppression that it experienced. But it really has a message for people everywhere in any situation where they are oppressed, that freedom is a possibility.
The story of liberation, the story of the importance of freedom, is not a one-time affair. It is a story that is constantly relived.
It is the story of Passover.
Passover, Traditions of Freedom, is made possible by funding from Hebrew National, makers of the kosher food products that answer to a higher authority. Additional funding is provided by these private foundations and individuals.
The drama of Passover took place thousands of years ago in the desert when the ancient Israelites were delivered from slavery in Egypt. The story has been retold from generation to generation. It is a saga of freedom from oppression and of the birth of a nation.
The Passover celebration is very important to the Jewish people because it was the exodus from Egypt that was actually the solidifying act of Jewish history. The tribes were perhaps an amalgamation of related, unrelated people. But once they emerged from Egypt and went through the ordeal of passing through the desert for 40 years and then back into the Promised Land, that's what made them a people.
This national march out of Egypt was preceded by families together in their own home, around a table, making a memory through food and through ritual.
Okay, that's for you. And I'm going to make some.
On Passover, we go back to that basic root. More than almost any other holiday, Passover reminds us that the central unit of Jewish life is in the home.
The home becomes one's personal temple. It becomes one's personal sanctuary. The fact is, more education of Jewish values and Jewish knowledge, more rituals are part of the home service than anywhere else. The Seder is a prime exemplar of that.
The Seder, meaning order, is the annual ritual celebrated in Jewish homes during Passover.
For me, the Passover Seder is the most exciting event of the year. As a mother and as a wife, it's my time to cook, to put together a meal at the home, to have friends, to have many outside people come and share this evening with us. I don't know how we're going to figure who sits where, but maybe we can figure
Not only at the Seder table, the ritual table, our family and friends, but also the memories and guidance of ancient rabbis, prophets, the lessons and jokes taught and told by great-grandparents who are no longer with us. It is a time in which memories come together and memories are made. At my Seder table, at the beginning, there's a joke. I take an egg and say, who can make this egg stand up? And the kids know the story. They know the trick. But the fact is that my father did that. And he comes alive again at that moment. And everything that he taught me somehow begins to get to my children.
And that is the most important part. We are protected always in God's good hands. Right.
There's a simple physical act of participation by eating the foods which at this point have great meaning. We have the desert bread, we have the wine that symbolizes joy, we have eggs for death and rebirth, we have greens that signify spring. And each time we eat those pieces of material, we're participating in the traditions and the meanings of the culture.
As a parent, it's your role to create traditions for your family. And as difficult it is very often to do something like a Passover Seder, it's really important because all the effort that you put into it is creating a tradition. And not only is it creating a tradition for my nuclear family, but because Jews all over the world have done this for thousands of years, it creates a tradition that will live on for an entire people.
Right. The hard labor is the chopping of all the food, and the sweetness is in the eating of it.
There are elements of the Seder as we know it today that come from biblical times, rabbinic times, medieval times, and then there's some modern material as well. A person who experiences the Seder is really walking through the corridors of Jewish history in the very brief span of sitting around the table and experiencing this holiday of redemption.
When we begin the Seder, we use a technique to bring people to the table. You do this, I do that, she does that. It creates a sense of time is coming. Let's get the Seder going. And that sense of urgency is a replaying of the sense of urgency at the first Seder in Egypt.
Here's one of those words. I need an egg, I need an egg. Your kingdom for an egg. Anybody know how to make this egg stand up straight?
Posture lessons?
You didn't do that. Okay, so we have, what do we have here? We have the zroa, the shank bone, and the base of the egg, the horseradish kimoror, the charoset.
All the items on the Seder plate have obvious meaning related to the Egyptian experience, but also other kind of metaphoric ideas about life.
Vegetable.
The Seder is celebrated by family and friends who bring the distinctive traditions of their forebears to the table, making every Seder unique. But there is unity as well. Every Seder follows the same basic order and includes similar prayers, songs, and rituals.
We begin the Seder with a blessing over the wine. It is a reminder, right at the beginning, of God's role in our relationship to God through history. Wine is used again and again. It represents an interesting metaphor, because the process of becoming free is a long-term process.
It's a good year. There's nothing like the first cup.
Delightful. Oh, wonderful. Okay. A few times I just be assured of having clean hands. Okay.
Karpas.
Karpas. We're now going to eat a vegetable, a green vegetable. Why do we eat a green vegetable? Anybody know why?
Because it's hard to find pink ones.
It reminds us of this holiday season. What is this holiday season? Anybody know?
Well, time of our freedom. Blessed art thou, Lord our God, sovereign of the universe, who has created the fruit of the ground.
That's your father's tuition also.
Matzah is central to the Seder. A piece is broken in half, and the larger half, called the afikomen, is hidden away for children to find at the end of the meal.
Look at that. Samurai matzah cutter. Which is
Obviously,
the larger
this is the larger. Okay.
Hiding the afikomen at the beginning of the meal and having the children know that they will have to retrieve it at the end of the meal keeps them interested and hopefully awake throughout the Seder.
You should look at this matzah because this is what you're going to have to find after it's hidden.
Now, my father, what he would do is he would take the matzah, put it over his shoulder, like this, and say the section from the Bible which says that the Jews would take their kneading troughs and put it on their shoulders, and that they left Egypt. They had no time for the dough to rise. And then what he would do is walk around and then suddenly sneak away.
I guess and go and hide the matzah for the afikomen.
What afikomen?
What afikomen?
What matzah?
The afikomen ritual varies from home to home, engaging children in creative and diverse ways.
Can
I ask you a few questions?
Yeah.
You look like you came from a trip. Where are you coming from?
From Egypt
Where are you going to?
to Jerusalem.
What are you taking with you?
Unleavened bread and bitter herbs.
And what is that in Hebrew?
Asal marah.
Was it a long trip?
Yes.
Why'd you leave Mitzrayim?
Because the king of Egypt made us slaves.
For a long time, right?
Yeah.
What was his name?
Paro.
Did you rush to get out of there?
No. Yeah.
You certainly did.
This is the kiseh for Eliyahu HaNavi.
We opened the door to allow Elijah, or Eliyahu Navi, into our meal, into the Seder. Eliyahu is the forerunner for the Messiah. He was the one who will bring us redemption and happiness.
In a custom preserved by Jews from Morocco, the Seder plate itself is used to recreate the Exodus. The song Bibhilu, which means in a hurry, recalls the urgency of the event.
The big plate with that beautiful scarf symbolizes the cloud that went with the children of Israel when they were in the desert. It was a protection from God.
Every legal fact in our religion has a reason of being there. So we have to carry on and hold on to the traditions.
The various unique approaches that different communities have developed, new customs, new strategies, just absolutely fascinating. There is a unity of goal, but a variety of technique.
While family custom brings a unique approach to each Seder, the Haggadah provides its structure and continuity. Thousands of different Haggadahs have been produced throughout the centuries, some formal, others quite personal. Yet they all impose a fundamental unity on the Passover Seder, wherever it is observed.
Let all who are hungry come and eat. Let all who are in need come and celebrate Passover. This year we are here. Next year in the land of Israel. This year we are slaves. Next year, free men. And if there's anything that tells us the purpose in the entire Haggadah, it's about the need to experience Passover. Every generation and generation, man is obligated to see himself as if he went out of Egypt. Why do we tell the story of how we were slaves?
make sure it doesn't happen again to anybody. So this can't happen, and nobody will be enslaved again, and we all know the cruelties, and so we wouldn't do this to anybody.
Africans were brought over to this country, they're oppressed. I mean, there are lots of different cases. And I just think that, we have to know, like, through all cases, we have to make sure we remember that, what happened to us, our ancestors, and also make sure that doesn't happen to others.
The lessons of Passover, retold every year, are as relevant today as they were on the evening of the first Seder, as described in the Bible.
The Bible describes a Seder of sorts that took place in Egypt on the night that the Exodus began. The Jews sat in their homes while outside God killed the firstborn of the Egyptians. There was a ritual that the Jews went through that involved a lamb which had been sacrificed, that involved the eating of matzah.
The Seder sanctifies many of the ancient folk customs. The time of the year, the Seder, the sheep, the matzah is very much similar to what our ancestors did as sheep herders and nomads.
The Israelites in biblical times, who were nomads, of course, and raised lambs in the desert in order to survive. And whenever they slaughtered a lamb, it was a very big occasion. And most notably, to offer thanks to God or to some holy person of their past. So therefore, when it's said that one must slaughter the Paschal lamb, we know it was a very important occasion.
My suspicion is that at the time of the Exodus from Egypt, God commanded the people to take what was familiar to them, the sheep, because it was the time of the year that the lambs were born, the matzah, which was the basic hardtack of the desert, the reclining, which they were comfortable with, and take all those together, but elevate and change them into a different kind of metaphor for freedom.
Subsequent to the Exodus from Egypt, in the days when the temple stood in Jerusalem, the Jews experienced a Passover that was a ritualized re-experience of what had happened in Egypt and still retained as its centerpiece the Passover sacrifice as it was done in the temple in Jerusalem. After the temple was destroyed in 70 AD, the Seder took on a slightly different cast. You no longer had the Passover sacrifice. And so rabbis, Jewish scholars, Jewish communities worked on creating a set of rituals that would recreate the Passover experience.
For example, on the Seder plate, the shank bone represents the original Paschal lamb, both from the time of Egypt and the time of the temple. Throughout all Jewish history, the levels of those customs accrued. You have Egyptian, Bedouin, Persian, Greek, Roman, medieval, and modern. All those come together, and that's why the Seder we have today may be similar to what was done thousands of years ago, but has a uniqueness and freshness every year.
Why is this night different from all other nights? On all other nights we may eat either leavened bread or unleavened bread. On this night, why only leavened bread?
Why do we only eat unleavened bread tonight? Do you know why we only eat matzah tonight, Lee?
Yes, because when our ancestors left Egypt, they were in such a hurry to get away that their bread didn't have time to rise.
That's right. And in addition to that, when they fled into the desert, they ate desert bread. And the desert bread is the unleavened bread that the Bedouin eat every day, and that's the matzah. This is the original matzah. We're celebrating Passover with our friends the Bedouin, because when our ancestors left Egypt, Many ages ago, they too were nomads in this very same desert. Passover was a commemoration of the Exodus, the movement from slavery to freedom. And since the people moved from Egypt, which is a settled country, into the desert, where people felt freer in any case, many desert traditions were adapted into Passover and the celebration of Passover. The flight of the Israelites from Egypt is symbolized in eating unleavened bread, because unleavened bread is the bread of the desert. There's no leaven in the desert. Now, there is probably some apocryphal addition in the Bible itself when it says the reason that they ate unleavened bread is because their bread didn't have a chance to leaven, owing to the rush, owing to the hurry to get out of Egypt.
Kosher law is the integration of biblical injunctions together with oral traditions which have been handed down for thousands of years. The baking of Passover matzah, from the time that water is introduced to the flour until the time that the matzah is actually baked, has to take less than 18 minutes. The 18-minute rule, if you will, is tied very much to the oral tradition, which the rabbis have told us means that in less than 18 minutes the bread will not rise. There is a special type of matzah which is known as shmura matzah. Shmura means watched over.
Matzah, matzah.
The wheat is watched from the time it is cut, and then it's under continuous rabbinical supervision from that time until the matzah is produced. The traditional role of the rabbinical supervision of matzah takes place from the time that the wheat begins to be ground within any individual flour mill, throughout the production of the flour, the transportation of the flour, and the ultimate disposition of the flour within the matzah baking facility.
You see how it's getting sticky? Yeah, I saw it.
We are looking that basically all of the production equipment is totally clean of any non-Passover flour residue. And in addition, we are making sure that all of the wheat bins are empty of wheat which may have been tempered with water. Our job as rabbinic supervisors is the melding of 20th century food technology together with knowledge of our ancient tradition and customs.
Over the years, we have managed to maintain a recipe for matzah that's very special. It's not special because we originated, it's special because it's 4,000 years old, and the recipe simply is flour and water, and get it in the oven within 18 minutes. We have tried to maintain the traditions of Passover, but we've tried to do it in a modern way. The rabbis tell me that the important thing really here is the people. When you manufacture matzah, the main element is intent. That you know why you're making the matzah, for whom you're making the matzah, and that the matzahs are preserved in their original fashion as closely as possible.
You know, I'm here and I'm baking matzah, and I think that this is some kind of it's a mitzvah for all the Jews who are eating our product, that I am a big part of it, because I am here, I'm baking matzah from flour and water. Looks like it's nothing, but it is. This matzah is going to be on the Seder tables of the people.
The commandment to eat only unleavened bread, matzah, is basic to the Passover observance. Great care must be taken to remove all traces of leavening agents from the home before the holiday begins.
Before Passover, we make sure that all bread or any bread products or anything that could be turned into a bread product is out of the home. So we really clean the house thoroughly, any place we think there might be a crumb, especially in the kitchen, where everything gets scrubbed down and counters get covered so that there's no chance that any kind of bread product will be in our Passover food. It is a lot of effort. It makes the holiday very special, though.
A lot of effort in the home becomes a task of huge proportions in a commercial kitchen.
We use boiling water. The rabbi stands all the time and supervises and makes sure that it's used. There's a lot of preparations and things we have to do in order to make sure that El Al passengers can fly freely and know that we have prepared everything according to Pesach guidelines. We clean up all the machinery and using the torch to clean and make sure that our ovens are kosherized as we should do for the Pesach season, making sure that there are no remnants of any food that was prepared before that, and of course not any leavened bread. And then we are ready for Passover.
On the night before Passover, the family engages in a ritual. We place bread in each of the rooms of the house, and together the children and the family goes from room to room to make certain that we've cleared the house of all leaven.
והלילה הזה כולו מסע שבכל הלילות אנו אוכלים שערי ירקות והלילה
הלילה זה מרור